Heroes of Tara is a tabletop RPG by Coronite Press, written by Jake Dirksen and published in 2025 after a successful Kickstarter. It uses the rule set for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but sets out to do two things, essentially. One, recast the rules of D&D into a completely different kind of game where HP and spell recovery is long and relatively difficult, and therefore combat is not constantly occurring. And two, present to you what is very likely the most comprehensive treatment of Celtic or Gaelic folklore and ancient culture ever presented in an RPG. And the reason that this book can so thoroughly and lovingly embrace this particular culture and folklore is the fact that the author is an archaeologist by profession, and the subject of this supplement is within his field of study. In this video, I want to walk you through the contents of the 407-page book that is Heroes of Tara. I found this book to be an incredible read, and I think it would be a disservice to try and summarize all the interesting historical information about what is now considered present-day Ireland, and some of it can't be summarized anyway. For example, the book starts with a discussion of the definition of Celtic, which is really a rather loose term that refers to a group of related languages, artistic motifs, and social practices. The Celtic-speaking world spanned virtually all of Europe at one point, but it was never one ethnicity or culture. And as far as the Celtic literature that has survived to this day, the stuff is often so trippy and incongruous that J.R.R. Tolkien himself thought that they were a bit much. Fortunately, this supplement really sort of tames the wildest and most nonsensical elements of Celtic lore and presents what I would consider to be a very approachable, playable gaming landscape. But it's not really an academic book. The author creates a new world called Ariu, which is a name for Ireland in the Old Irish language, and this world resembles mythic Ireland, but it's sort of whipped into shape so that everything is cohesive and makes sense, as opposed to dreamlike and illogical like the way the Irish folk tales often veer. As far as time period, we're roughly in between the 1st century BC and 3rd century AD. There's no Christianity, there are no cities, Rome is coming into its age of full dominion. It's firmly Iron Age times. There are these long stretches of writing in this book that delve into things like ancient history of the setting, which of course has weaved into it real history and folklore. It feels like an exciting academic journey. In the case of this island of Ariu, it was first occupied by these horrible primordial giants called Thaumavorians. When humans showed up on the island, the Thaumavorians terrorized and enslaved the humans. Over centuries, some of the humans managed to escape the island, but they ended up enslaved in their new home on Hellas, where they had to carry bags of dirt up a mountain endlessly. They eventually made their escape from Hellas by stretching their bags into sails and actually sailing back to Ariu. And these people became known as the Firbolg, or Men of the Bag, and they were considered the first mortals to properly settle the island, establishing the Hill of Tara, which became the seat of the loosely centralized feudal government that you engage with in the setting. The tale goes on until we get to the present day, where we have 5 kingdoms on the island and hundreds of tribes, each serving one king. Sort of. The island contains about 300,000 humans total and is almost completely pastoral and agricultural. Any given community rarely exceeds 500 people, and they all live in these circular huts with thatched roofs. You have a high king, and under that there are clan chieftains who proclaim themselves as kings, and then clans large and small. There are about 300 clans across the entire island. If you're familiar with medieval society, then this will sound familiar. Social status is divided into 4 castes: royalty, the nobility, free folk, and servants. In this world, slaves are only allowed to wear 1 color, servants can wear up to 2 colors, free folk can wear 3, artisans and traders can wear 4, the warrior aristocracy can wear 5, Fili, which are this setting's elite class of poets and seers, can wear 6, and royalty can wear 7 or more colors. I keep sort of falling into these ruts where I'm telling you about all of these minor details because I think in a crowded field of RPG settings, it's these little details that can set a game apart from the others. This book is so filled with fascinating bits like this that in the end you come away with a real sense of time and place, which is pretty important for an RPG that's trying to give you a unique world to step inside of. But that being said, I should probably speed it up a bit or we'll be here for hours. There are 3 universal principles or values that each person in Aryu society sort of intrinsically follow, that of honor, hospitality, and the veneration of knowledge. As far as households, they're usually those round hut-like houses, thatched roofs, usually no tables or chairs. Everyone just sort of sits around on the floor eating out of bowls, unless you're some fancy noble or something. War is waged on a very small scale, usually no more than 100 warriors to a side in any given battle. But see, here is some more of that delicious nuance that I just can't resist telling you about. While warriors of the society will kill each other in battle, they aren't necessarily out to annihilate enemy clans. Their main goal in each and every case is to look dominant and brave. The island is too small to be killing entire villages off. The sad fact is that all those villagers are needed in order to maintain the farmlands and keep food production up. Oh, and clans are constantly, and I mean constantly, stealing cattle from each other. It's almost literally a sport on the island. There are long discussions about funerary practices, the afterlife, which is an actual destination called the Otherworld, where a soul lives its second life until their name is forgotten in the mortal world, at which time they are reincarnated in the mortal world, usually within their same clan. There is ample detail about what people eat, economy and trade, language and literacy, how people live from day to day and keep their hair, their property and inheritance customs, romance and marriage, rulership, slavery, travel and transportation. You get the idea. This feels more like a living world than most RPGs. I wanted to touch on one of the most important features of this game, which is obviously its treatment of the underlying D&D 5e rules. I think that in the end, it's still 5e, but some of the changes made to the rule set cut really deep and sort of transform the experience into something that really does feel a little different. Let me just list out some of the differences for you. Races are called tribes. There are 3 major tribes to play as, 4 Outlander tribes and 3 so-called hidden tribes. There are just 3 classes, what are essentially Ranger, Fighter, and maybe Mystic. Each of these 3 have 3 subclasses that further distinguish a player's role in terms of their play options. There are new creature types, otherworldly being, with the subtypes Fairy, Monster, Nature Spirit, and Phantom, as well as Thaumavorian, those horrible giants we saw at the beginning of the island's history. Arcana, History, and Religion skills have been removed, while a few new skills have been added, Chariot Driving and 3 for casting spells. But okay, here's the biggest one in my opinion, and I've seen this before in other 5e adaptations and loved it there as well. Short rests are 8 hours and long rests are 7 days. This essentially lengthens the time required to recover from battle by a factor of about 20, and materially changes the nature of the game. I know a lot of defenders of 5e, especially its creators, like to brag about how versatile the vanilla rules are, but the rest system is actually the source of a lot of stress because it encourages and enables perpetual combat. With short and long rests taking as long as they do in this rendition of the game, combat is something that simply can't transpire 3 times a day. It's something that might happen once in a while, and players are meant to pursue other means of telling a story. Another little sentence here that has a huge impact is, long rests cannot usually be taken in the wilderness. This means camping is not restorative in most cases, and PCs will need to seek the hospitality of a hut somewhere. They have to plan their excursions into the wilderness to some degree, and the divide between wilderness and civilization is much more pronounced. PCs have to stay friendly with NPC communities and interact with Aryu's customs of hospitality in the setting in order to survive. It says here that the 7-day rest can be treated as a downtime phase of play, and I was wondering if the game actually provided any downtime activities. And interestingly, there are half a dozen different special social encounters detailed towards the end of the book that could double as downtime activities. Each of them are specially structured mini-games that are culturally integrated into the setting. Kuramir is a formalized boasting contest between 2 to 5 characters, and it's always held during a feast, the prize being the choicest cut of meat at the table. Players track confidence points and can boost, scorn, flourish, and make other specific moves in order to reduce everyone else's confidence to 0. The meat that the winner eats will actually give them temporary supernatural powers. Bardic competitions are structurally similar. Brian judgments are a bit different. They're always composed of 3 parties, a judge and 2 litigants. It's basically an ancient Gaelic people's court. Both litigants have an influence score that starts at 0, and their goal is to gain more influence than the other, while the judge is trying to reduce those scores. This whole system of litigation formalizes what would otherwise be a drawn-out conversation or a charisma check, or let's be honest here, combat. Even though this is just one of 6 social encounter mini-games tucked away at the end of the book, this system in particular, I think, is one of the main pillars that distinguishes this game as something just fundamentally different from the standard 5e rules framework. And there's more in this vein. Druidic ceremonies, which have the goal of gaining the cooperation and aid of spirits, is meant to be an involved, drawn-out process. And there's also a collection of actual mini-games for some actual downtime. There are 4 of these in the book: an ancient board game called Fickle, hurling, which is an actual present-day Olympic sport, chariot racing, and tossing, which, as primitive as that may sound, if you look it up, modern society has dozens, if not hundreds, of different tossing competitions to this day. As a species, we really like to see who can throw a thing the farthest. I wanted to briefly touch on the kinds of characters you can play. The game really wants you to choose from 3 major so-called tribes. The Aishi are an ancient, almost elf-like people who live inside of hills called Shi. They're descended from gods, but don't have godlike powers themselves. The Firbolg, if you recall, are the original settlers of the island, and they have some enhanced vision at night, as well as advantage against magical effects. And then there are the Gale, the most numerous and influential tribe of the island. They are resistant to fear effects and get a sort of second wind when dropping to 0 HP. You can also play as a Briton, Gaul, Pict, or Roman, each of which is mechanically very close to a Firbolg or a Gale. But then the game sort of lurches into some other, way more fantastical player options, like the Firklee, a sort of hybrid of human and fairy, the Firgorma, who are magical water folk, and the Gaverkune, who are animal folk, usually goat, bear, cat, or dog-headed, but really with the head of any animal you want. These are completely playable tribes with features and abilities and everything, but it did have me wondering about how they fit in to an otherwise extremely cohesive and plausible sort of low fantasy Iron Age setting. I feel like less is more with these super fantastical races, but every table has its own preferences. There's a lot more to this game, but I want to wrap it up here and maybe invite you to pick up the game and read the rest if you're interested. Cons: playable supernatural tribes. I really like the idea of playing as a mortal human and only encountering fairy type or animal head folk as NPCs. I didn't actually cover it in this video, but there are some other special tribes that I presume you can play as, all categorized under Dinashi. These are essentially fae folk and include hobbits, dwarves, goblins, leprechauns of course, and pixies, mostly under different names and with cultural features distinct from your standard fantasy book. This is a lot of options for players, and I'm sure some tables would really appreciate these options, but I think the strength of this game lies in restraint. Spell slots. I know that 99% of 5e based games just adopt the spell slot system found in the 5e SRD, but to me it's one of the biggest obstacles to ease of play with this framework. It would take some homebrewing, but I think if I ran Heroes of Tara, I would rework the spells to use a simpler mana point system, such as the one we've seen in Nimble, which I also covered on this channel. Pronunciation challenge. The names and terms in this game present a little bit of a challenge in the sense that the Irish language is not intuitively pronounced for a native English speaker. Fortunately, there is a 4-page guide to pronunciation at the end of the book that can help you along. It's about as good as you could ask for. Maybe some phonetic pronunciation guides in parentheses right next to each word would have been nice, but then there's the question of redundancy and greatly increasing the word count of the book, which leads to layout problems and reduced space for other content. Either way, the fact is, this game is trying to introduce you to a unique world culture, and you have to venture a bit outside of your comfort zone if you actually want to enjoy that culture. Pros: exhaustively researched. Leave it to an archaeologist to write a book that covers an ancient mythology this thoroughly. The appendix, starting at page 317, is essentially the start of what could be considered an entirely separate setting book that lovingly presents what by the end can only be considered a living, breathing world with endless little places to discover. No constant combat. The extended rest requirements and inability to take long rests in the wilderness means that PCs are going to find themselves interacting with civilization a lot. And since there are so many ways to resolve conflicts and actually spend time in the game that don't involve killing each other, the game is trying to take on a completely different feel than standard D&D 5e. Author is ready for more. The author Jake Dirksen mentioned to me that he has a lot more planned for Heroes of Tara, which was surprising to me since the core rulebook felt so exhaustive in nature. I didn't cover it in this video, but there are dozens of pages of spells and class abilities. It's more than just a setting, it's a very playable game with a fully fleshed out range of player options. But apparently, if he can sell enough of the core book, he's planning on publishing a book of monsters and a GM's guide, as well as some adventure modules or even a whole campaign. He also said he's looking for competent, creative collaborators to work on RPG materials. I'll leave his info below in case you want to reach out to him. I've had to come to peace with creators using D&D 5e as the basis of their own RPG, mostly because they tend to elevate the original game to new heights with a brilliant setting. This game belongs in that bucket of adaptations, with the bonus feature of it sidestepping the perpetual combat problem in the game. But this one is a relatively rare bird in the sense that it is so firmly couched in anthropological research and study that you can just sit there and read the book and bask in details that you know are derived from a real-life culture. This book is a reminder of the fact that being a GM in this hobby and reading these 400-page books is occasionally one of the greatest joys that the hobby has to offer. If you have even a hint of curiosity about Irish culture or folklore, or if you have any Irish heritage, you should definitely check this one out, even if just for the joy of reading it. I've left links for everything below. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see ya.